911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I have. My boss is down. She's got a cut on her arm.
Okay, where are you, sir?
2 Woodstock Drive, Linwood.
I got a phone call from Jim, and he just said, you know, April's dead, and I said, come on, Jim, let's not put her on.
And the news started trickling in that there was a shooting at Woodstock Drive at Linwood, which I knew was April's address, and I knew that there were only a few houses there.
My first glitch was that I can't believe something like this would happen down the street from a school and not in Linwood, because things like that don't happen in Linwood.
It's a day that is indescribable, and just hearing that date just takes me back.
I received that phone call, and I wasn't even told where to go. For some reason, I knew to go right to her house, and when I got there, I just couldn't believe it.
Lee called me maybe about an hour later and said, when's the last time you talked to April? And I said, yesterday. And she said, she's dead. And my first reaction is, she can't die. She's larger than life.
I actually didn't find out till much later that evening, around 4 o'clock, when news choppers were flying up above, that my mom's death was a potential homicide. So it was just like time stood still.
I just said, no, that, you know, this cannot be true.
My mom was 47 years old. What had happened to her?
It was just paralyzing from there.
I actually received a call from Jim Kauffman that night, acting as if he was a distraught husband, acting as if, you know, someone had murdered April Kauffman, just like we all thought.
When April Kauffman was found murdered in her upscale Linwood home on May 10th, 2012, it was the beginning of a 5-year mystery. Who would kill the veterans advocate and radio talk show host? And who was April Kauffman?
I describe her as larger than life.
She had a personality that would light up a room. Anyone who met her would never forget her.
Her personality was such that had you never met her and she was in the same room before you left, you would have met her.
The first thing I realized, she was a force to be reckoned with.
April from a young age was amazing. When she walked in the room, there was no mistaking that she was in the room. It was Tropical Storm April in training, I suppose.
She was brazen. She would say, like, this is how we roll. She was brave. Her saying was always, if you don't have courage, you don't have change.
The most generous person I think that I've ever met.
Such a bubbly personality, somebody who would lift you up no matter how deep and down you got. You could count on April to lift you out of the doldrum.
If per se she could help you and knew that you needed it, she would make sure that you got it, even if it was only her that was taking care of it. That's just the kind of person she was.
I mean, she was a boots on the ground warrior that was passionate about what she was doing, about the veterans, and yeah, she went for it.
She was smart. A lot of people would see that blonde hair, and if they assumed she was not smart, then that was a wrong assumption.
One of April's greatest passions was her tireless work for veterans.
Well, both of us, not knowing each other, were incredibly inspired and called to action after 9/11. You know, from feeling the safety of this great country, and, you know, she started right then on a campaign that we have to do better for our country, that veterans and military people are rock stars, we have to treat them that way. Buy American, get a flag, put your flag out, and she carried it through, straight through. That was like the beginning of her finding her purpose in life. And it definitely was crescending right before she was murdered.
April was just livid about the treatment that our veterans were getting, and went on a crusade. And if you know April, she was a bulldog. Once she got started on something, there wasn't any way to hold her back.
She was interested in helping get a petition signed with the appropriate amount of signatures to eliminate the need for veterans in our area to board a bus to go to Delaware to receive care that could be given in this area. She was hugely instrumental in getting the number of petitions required to really create that movement.
Who else would run into the secretary of the VA's office and just light up into him about the how bad our veterans were being treated? Only April could do something like that.
You know, she was calling my house 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock at night. My wife says, who the hell's this crazy woman? And then she met her. My wife loved her and everything. I mean, she just, like I said, was bigger than life, had a good heart and everything.
The veterans lost in that battle because she's not here. No one else would have the power to do the things that she could get done. And it's a shame. I feel bad for the veterans in that respect.
She wanted to do a show dedicated to veterans, and so we put aside, one day a week, at least 1 hour. She was just vibrant, full of life, full of opinions too. She wasn't short on telling you her opinion on different things.
As much as I talk, I want to be interviewed because I really want to tell you people. When I did this initiative and King Arthur and I started to tackle this situation with the lack of veterans health care, I'm really going to tell you who helped me, who gave me lip service, the people that really told me it would never be done, told me it would never be done.
She had such a great rapport and such a great sense of humor that we could joke about anything. So her joking about a flyby at her funeral or being taken out tomorrow or I feel like I'm on borrowed time. I didn't think twice about it at the time, but certainly now that we know what occurred, I think her words just jump out at you.
My legacy of leaving, a really beautiful daughter and 2 grandchildren on this planet, I really hope to God that people, hey, I could get a flyover at my funeral now, but could really say that here was an American citizen who really stood up and dug her heels in and yelled fire, and I expected it to be put out.
Then on June 13th, 2017, April's husband, Dr. James Kauffman, is arrested at his medical office on weapons charges. While the charges were unrelated to the death of April, many thought maybe this was a break in the case.
So earlier this morning, the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office, with the assistance of the FBI and local law enforcement agencies, executed a search warrant on the business office of Dr. James Kauffman.
You're not under arrest.
Listen.
You are not under your office and your house, your car and your person.
I don't believe it.
Yes, we do.
No, I'm not going to jail for this.
Dr. Kauffman displayed a handgun. Ultimately, hostage negotiators were called in and were able to talk him off the ledge, you might. He was taken into the psychiatric intervention program. He is under arrest as we continue to investigate the charges that will be filed against him.
On January 9th, 2018, the real break in the case came. Dr. Kauffman is charged with the murder of April.
For the past 5.5 years, since April Kauffman was found shot to death inside her home in Linwood, New Jersey, there's been little movement on this case, and no arrests had been made in connection with the murder. That is until today. Today, James Kauffman, age 69, and Ferdinand Augello, age 62, were charged with murder in connection with the death of April Kauffman, in addition to racketeering related to the illegal distribution of narcotics through Kauffman's former medical practice. Additionally, Augello is charged with conspiracy to commit the murder of James M. Kauffman. Sometime in 2011, James Kauffman and Ferdinand Augello propositioned a number of individuals to murder April Kauffman. The basis was that April Kauffman threatened to expose the illegal drug distribution operation.
May 10th, 2012 forever changed my life. I have been waiting patiently for justice, and today I was lucky enough to be granted justice.
Many thought the case was resolved. Justice was done and a trial would be the next step. No one was ready when it was discovered that Dr. Kauffman had taken his own life in a carefully planned suicide in jail.
I think that Dr. Kauffman realized he'd been found out. The gig was up, and I guess this was his answer. He certainly aged from the time when I took his deposition, certainly to the last court appearance we saw. Even from the first court appearance when we first saw him arrested for the gun charges until his last court appearance. It certainly, jail took a toll on him. He made a determination, and I guess, like I said, I guess this was his response to the amount of proof he heard. And yeah, God rest his soul. That's all I can say.
Makes you a little bit crazy knowing that the murderer of April Kauffman called me the night of the murder and acted like a distraught husband that had just lost his wife.
Well, actually, there are two Jimmy Kauffmans. There's a Jimmy Kauffman before he met April, and there's a Jimmy Kauffman afterwards. The Jimmy Kauffman before April, I didn't even notice him. I went to high school with him for 4 years. I saw him in the hallways. I would say hi to him. He'd say hi to me. Barely knew him. We had 3,200 kids in that high school. I was from Atlantic City. He was from the suburbs, the Ventnor Margate group. So I never saw him. I never noticed him. I lived about 5 houses away from him for 10 years in Linwood. I never saw him. And then suddenly he's with April. And he's with April, and you sure do notice him now. He's dressing flasher. He's wearing his leather jackets. He and April are riding together with their loud Harley Davidsons and roaring around the corner to our quiet suburban street.
As April would light up the room, and you wouldn't even know Jim was there, until somebody asked him a question. He was just very low key, him and April, they had a gun collection. They both rode motorcycles. They had some things in common.
I think he's a narcissist and a chameleon. And I think he's very, just like he planned his death and his letter, I think he planned her death the same way. Knowing now that this entire murder was being plotted, and he knew that she would never be able to fulfill her purpose. And it was almost like, not knowing who was going to murder, but I definitely knew and sensed that he was not happy with her having the limelight.
He, from what I know, he seemed like a decent guy. Again, a little stuck up because he had wealthy, good practice. It seemed to me they had a good relationship because she had all these businesses going. He had his practice going. They supposedly were out in Arizona a lot, another home they had out there, seemed to travel a lot. So to me, it seemed like it was fine. But I don't know. I missed something somewhere. A lot of people miss something somewhere.